I reached leisurely for the mailbox, as I'd done every morning for 17 years, since I'd settled in this quiet neighborhood of Midwest City. My fingers, knotted with arthritis, struggled to turn the key. In the drawer were bills, advertisements, and a cream-colored envelope that stood out among the other correspondence. The envelope was thick, embossed, obviously expensive. I turned it in my hands, looking at the calligraphy of the recipient's name. There was no return address, but the postmark indicated it had been sent from the suburbs of Midwest City, a neighborhood where the wealthy lived. Back in the house, I put the envelope on the kitchen table and started making my morning coffee. In my 77 years, I had a strict routine: rise at 6 in the morning, check the mail at 7, have breakfast and coffee, and read the morning paper. Order helped structure a life that without it seemed too empty. Coffee dripped slowly into the coffee pot, filling the kitchen with a familiar aroma. I picked up the envelope again and carefully opened it with a letter opener, another habit from my days in engineering. Inside revealed a gold-embossed postcard. Regina Martin and Edward Prescott invite you to share in the joy of their marriage. I read the words, but couldn't quite grasp their meaning. Regina, my daughter Regina. She's getting married, and she sent me an invitation. I slowly sank down in my chair, still holding the card with trembling hands. The last time I'd seen Regina was 32 years ago, when she was 10. She stood at the window, watching me leave with my suitcase after another exhausting fight with Lorraine. I waved, but Regina turned away, and since then, I'd only seen her in pictures. Of course, I tried to keep in touch. For the first few years after the divorce, I sent child support, birthday and Christmas presents, and wrote letters. I showed up on the scheduled meeting days, but Lorraine found a reason to cancel every time. Regina's sick. Regina has an important test. Regina doesn't want to see you. Eventually, I stopped coming, but continued to write and send gifts until one day all my letters came back marked "Addressee dropped out." I learned that Lorraine and her daughter had moved to another city, but I never gave up trying to find them. When I was able to find their new address a few years later, I started writing again. This time no answers came, but no letters were returned. I hoped that Regina was at least reading them. When Regina turned 18, I sent her a special letter with my phone number and address. I asked to see her, saying I wanted to explain that I loved her and always had. There was no response, but I didn't give up. I sent greetings every Christmas and birthday, occasionally receiving formal cards in return, apparently at Lorraine's insistence, concerned that her daughter might forget her father altogether. Years went by. I learned that Regina had gone to college and then law school. I was proud of her, even though I had no right to that pride. When she graduated, I sent her a large check, but it came back torn into small pieces. After that, I stopped trying. The pain of rejection became too much. I immersed myself in work, dated women, but none of the relationships lasted long. They all felt like there was an unhealed wound in my life. Eventually, I accepted my loneliness as a given. Upon retiring, I moved to Midwest City, closer to where I knew Regina lived. Not to impose my presence on her, just to be close by in case she ever wanted to see me. Sometimes I'd drive downtown, hoping to meet her by chance on the street. But as the years went by, the meeting never happened. And now the wedding invitation. The coffee in the pot boiled over, filling the kitchen with the smell of burning. I hurried to turn off the stove, but I didn't make a new one. My appetite was gone. I reread the invitation again, paying attention to the details. The wedding was to be in 3 weeks at the Golden Valley Country Club, an upscale venue. Apparently, the groom came from a wealthy family. At the bottom of the card was a note in neat handwriting. "I hope to see you, Mr. Hollister. Lorraine said I should invite you. Not Daddy, not even Father, just Mr. Hollister." And that phrase, "Lorraine said I should invite you." Not from the heart, but out of obligation. I put the card aside and went to the window. Outside the window was a well-tended but modest garden, my pride and comfort of recent years. The spring flowers were just beginning to bloom, and the air was filled with the scent of lilacs. My gaze fell on the rose bush by the fence, the same variety that little Regina loved so much. I'd planted those roses in every house I'd lived in since my divorce, an irrational but persistent attempt to stay connected to my daughter. In the early years after the separation, when I still managed to see Regina occasionally, I would cut the prettiest buds for her. She would put them in a glass of water and take them home. I wondered if she remembered that. I went back to the table and took the invitation again. To go or not to go? Reason told me that my presence was undesirable. The formal invitation had been sent out of a sense of duty, perhaps even under the pressure of public opinion. What's it like not to invite my own father to a wedding? But my heart desperately wanted to see my daughter on the most important day of her life. I pulled out a photo album from the top drawer of my desk. It contained all the pictures of Regina I'd managed to collect over the years. The first ones were still from the happy period of our married life. Regina's newborn in the hospital, her first steps, her first birthday, a picnic in the park. Then there were the rare school photos that Lorraine reluctantly sent me for the first few years after the divorce. And then there were the newspaper clippings. Regina winning an award at the school Olympics, Regina in her senior year, Regina being the best law student in her class. The last few years have added photos from social media that I was able to find through mutual acquaintances. I've been looking at these pictures, trying to capture in the features of a grown woman the little girl I once rocked in my arms. She looks so much like her mother, the same high cheekbones, the same proud turn of the shoulders. But the eyes are my eyes, gray-blue, with the distinctive crease of the eyelids. The fluctuations continued all day. Toward evening, sitting in my worn armchair with a glass of whiskey, I made my decision. I would go. No matter what happens, no matter how coldly I am received, I must see my daughter. If not for her sake, then at least for my own sake, so that I wouldn't regret the missed opportunity in the remaining years of my life. The next morning I called my old friend Mortimer, the only one who knew the whole story of my family drama. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Mortimer asked after I broke the news to him. "Remember what happened at your mother-in-law's funeral? Lorraine almost called the police." I remembered. 8 years ago, I had tried to attend the funeral of Lorraine's mother, a woman who had once treated me warmly. Lorraine had made a scene, accusing me of coming just to see Regina. That was partly true, but I really wanted to say goodbye to my former mother-in-law. I never got to talk to my daughter that day. "It'll be different this time," I replied with a confidence I didn't feel. "She invited me herself." "At Lorraine's insistence," Mortimer reminded me. "Are you sure Regina even knows about this invitation?" I hesitated. It was indeed possible that Lorraine had sent the invitation on my behalf without asking her, or that Regina had signed it without looking, among hundreds of other invitations. But the handwriting on the note, it seemed sincere, albeit restrained. "I must try, Mort," I said at last. "This may be my last chance." "Then I'll go with you," Mortimer said firmly. "I don't want you to be there alone if things go wrong." I was grateful to my friend, but I refused. This was something I had to handle on my own. The next 2 weeks passed in preparation. I bought a new suit, dark blue, conservative, but elegant. I ordered an expensive watch as a gift for the groom and a diamond brooch for Regina. I knew Regina might reject my gifts, but I wanted them to be dignified. I also started writing a speech, just in case I got a chance to say a few words. I rewrote it over and over, trying to find the right words to express all my love and remorse without blaming Lorraine or making Regina feel guilty for the years of estrangement. The day before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in bed, imagining different scenarios of meeting my daughter. In the most optimistic one, she would throw herself into my arms with tears in her eyes, saying that she had always dreamed of reconciliation. In the most pessimistic, security would escort me out under my arms after a scandal caused by Lorraine. The reality would likely be somewhere in the middle. A cold greeting, a formal exchange of pleasantries, maybe an awkward father-bride dance if tradition held. But even that would be more than I'd had in the last 30 years. On my way from the bedroom to the kitchen, I stopped at the hallway mirror. Staring back at me from the reflection was a tall, lean old man with a straight back and proud posture. His gray hair, once thick and brown, had thinned, but I still styled it carefully. The wrinkles in my face were deeper, but my blue eyes remained clear. I adjusted my shirt collar and headed for the kitchen. At breakfast, I looked over the invitation one more time. The wedding was 2 weeks and 3 days away. I marked the date on my calendar with a red marker, even though I remembered it perfectly. May 21st, Saturday, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Ceremony in the garden of the Golden Valley Country Club, followed by a reception in the main hall. I felt nervous for the first time in years. Something inside me, some sixth sense told me that this wedding would change my life. For better or for worse, I don't know, but it would. After breakfast, I went out into the garden. The morning was fresh, with a light breeze that ruffled the leaves of the apple trees. I went to a rose bush, squatted down, and examined it. Soon the first buds would begin to bloom. By the time we get married, they'll probably be in full bloom. I'll cut the most beautiful flower for a boutonniere. That evening, I got a call from my little sister Eleanor. "Ron, I heard the news. You've been invited to Regina's wedding?" I didn't ask how she knew. Eleanor always had her own channels of information. "Yeah, got the invitation yesterday," I replied. "And you're going?" "Of course." "Even after everything that's happened?" I sighed. Eleanor had never approved of my attempts to repair my relationship with my daughter. "She's not worthy of you," my sister often said. "That girl allowed her mother to turn herself against her own father." I didn't argue, but I didn't agree either. Regina had been a child when Lorraine and I divorced. Children usually took the side of the parent they were left to live with. "Yes, Ellie, even after everything." "You know it can be a trap, don't you? Lorraine has always had a knack for making a scene. I don't think Lorraine would use her daughter's wedding for revenge." "You've always been naive, brother." Eleanor's voice held a mixture of annoyance and tenderness. "Would you like me to come with you? Lorraine will think twice before making a scandal in my presence." I smiled. Eleanor and Lorraine had never gotten along. Two strong women, too similar in their stubbornness. "Thank you, Ellie, but I have to do this on my own." "Suit yourself. But if anything goes wrong, call me immediately. I'll come over and get you out of there." We talked some more about her children, my nephews, who had already become parents themselves. Eleanor was 8 years younger than I was, and her family life had worked out much better than mine. Husband, 3 children, 6 grandchildren. Sometimes I envied her, but more often I was happy for my sister. After my conversation with Eleanor, I sat in the living room for a long time looking at the family photos on the walls. Most of them were old. My parents, my sister and I as children, Eleanor with her husband and children. And only in one corner were pictures of Regina, the few I had. Well, maybe there would be another one soon, Regina in her wedding dress. Before I went to bed, I pulled out the invitation again and read it. My eye caught the name of the groom, Edward Prescott. I knew nothing about this man. I wondered what he was like. Is he worthy of my daughter? Does he love her the way she deserves? I hoped their marriage would be happier than mine had been. The next day I drove downtown to Carter & Sons jewelry store. I knew the owner, Horace Carter, from the days when I designed an addition to his store. Horace was old now, but still personally served the regular customers. "Ronald, what a pleasant surprise. What brings you to me?" I explained the situation. Horace listened with understanding. He knew my family's history. "I want something special for my daughter, something she could wear on her wedding day, but not too obtrusive." "I understand," Horace nodded. I think I have just the right thing." He pulled a diamond and pearl brooch in the shape of a flower from the display case. "White is a symbol of purity, suitable for a wedding. Elegant but not flashy. It can be attached to a bouquet or to a dress." The brooch was beautiful, but I felt like it was missing something. I asked if I could add a small ruby to the center of the flower. "Of course," Horace said. "But why a ruby specifically?" "It's Regina's horoscope stone. It will remind her of the roses she loved as a child." Horace smiled understandingly. "I'll have it done by the end of the week. What about a gift for the groom?" I chose a watch, a classic one, engraved on the back. "To Edward from Regina's father. Cherish her time." A little ambiguous, but well-intentioned. When I got home, I decided to gather all the information I could find about Edward Prescott. The invitation did not specify his profession or any other details. I called my former colleague Frank, whose son worked at the law firm where I knew Regina worked. "Prescott? Yeah, I know someone like that," Frank said after a brief conversation with his son. "Partner in the firm of Baker, Harris and Associates. Specializes in corporate law. Seems to be pretty successful. James has met him a couple times at inter-firm events. He says he strikes me as an intelligent and ambitious man, about 40 years old, maybe a little more." I thanked Frank for the information. So Edward is about 10 years older than Regina and works for a rival firm. Interesting. As the wedding date approached, my excitement grew. I reread the speech I'd written several times, even though I realized I probably wouldn't get a chance to deliver it. I rehearsed different scenarios for meeting Regina and Lorraine. Several times I came close to calling my daughter and asking if she really wanted to see me at the wedding, but each time something stopped me. Maybe the fear of hearing a negative answer. Instead, I wrote a letter, just another in a long line of messages that Regina probably never read. But this time I decided I would hand it to her personally on her wedding day. Let her decide whether or not to read it. A week before the wedding, I pulled a box of family albums out of the closet, the same box that had been kept untouched for the past 15 years. Wiping the dust off the cardboard lid, I felt my heart clench with a premonition of pain. These pictures were evidence of another life, one that was in the past, one where I was a husband and father, not a lonely old man. I settled back in my chair and opened the first album. Lorraine and I were married in August of 1970. Lorraine in a simple white dress, me in a strict suit. We are smiling, holding hands, very young. I am 22, she is 20. I remember that day down to the smallest detail, the smell of the flowers in the little church, the light rain after the ceremony, which everyone thought was a good sign, Lorraine's nervous smile as she said her vows. She was beautiful, dark hair, high cheekbones, clear eyes. I couldn't believe my good fortune. We met at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. I had gotten there with a broken leg after an unfortunate fall at a construction site. A young engineer just starting out in my career, I was horrified at the prospect of spending weeks in a cast. Lorraine was my nurse. She would enter the room with a smile that seemed to light up everything around her, and from day one she called me my brave patient. By the time I was discharged, I was hopelessly in love. Our courtship was brief. 3 months later I proposed. Another 3 months later we were married. Lorraine's parents were delighted. They saw me as a reliable, promising husband for their daughter. My mother, however, thought we were in a hurry. "You hardly know the girl, Ronald," she said, but I was sure I had met the love of my life. The first 2 years were happy ones. We rented a small apartment in the suburbs, went to the lake or the mountains on weekends. Lorraine continued to work at the hospital. I was building a career in an engineering firm. We dreamed of a house and children, but decided to wait until our financial situation was more stable. I turned the page of the scrapbook. Here, Lorraine and I are on the porch of our first home of our own, a small but cozy little house with a green lawn. We bought it when we found out Lorraine was pregnant. It happened a little earlier than we had planned, but we were happy. Lorraine was radiant. Her rounded belly seemed like a miracle to me. I was looking forward to the arrival of our child, already imagining myself as a father. Regina was born on a July morning when the sun was just beginning to rise above the horizon. The labor was hard. 16 hours. Lorraine was in severe pain. I was by her side, holding her hand, feeling helpless. When the newborn's cry finally sounded, we both cried tears of relief and joy. Our daughter was a tiny curl with a red face and sparse blonde hair. "She looks like you," Lorraine said, though I saw no resemblance. To me, Regina was just a miracle, a perfect, tiny little person who suddenly became the center of my universe. The first months after Regina was born were difficult. Lorraine suffered from postpartum depression, although we didn't call it that at the time. She cried a lot, complained of fatigue, sometimes sat for hours staring out the window while Regina screamed in her crib. I tried to help as much as I could, but I spent most of the day at work. We hired a nanny, an elderly woman named Martha, who was a real lifesaver for us. Gradually, Lorraine came to her senses. By Regina's first birthday, she was back to her old self, energetic, cheerful. She threw a big party, inviting all her friends and relatives. The photo from that day shows Regina sitting in a high chair, covered in cake, with Lorraine and me standing on either side of her, happy and proud. The next 3 years were probably the happiest of my life. Regina grew up to be an inquisitive, fun-loving child. She started talking early, knew all the names of the flowers in our garden, loved it when I rocked her on the swing I had built in the yard. Lorraine wanted to go back to work, but decided to wait until Regina was in kindergarten. Instead, she took up social activities, joined the PTA at the local school, organized charity events, and then something changed. It's hard for me to pinpoint exactly when the rift began. Maybe when Lorraine began to talk more and more about feeling trapped inside 4 walls, or when I started staying late at work because I got promoted and my workload increased, or when we stopped talking about everything but household trivia. I flipped through a few more pages of the scrapbook. Here's Regina walking to first grade, a little girl with 2 pigtails and a backpack that seems bigger than she is. I remember walking her to the school gates, how she hugged me goodbye and bravely walked toward her new life. Lorraine is not in this picture. She went back to work at the hospital when Regina went to school and was on duty that morning. As Lorraine returned to work, our relationship became even more strained. She came home tired, irritable, and often snapped at little things. I didn't understand what was wrong. She wanted to go back to work. Now she was accusing me of not helping with the house and the baby, even though I was doing everything I could. We began to argue, rarely at first, then more and more often. Regina, of course, noticed the change in the atmosphere of the house. She became quieter, more withdrawn. Sometimes I found her sitting at the top of the stairs, listening to our arguments downstairs. At such times I felt a pang of guilt, but I didn't know how to fix it. Lorraine wanted a second child. I was against it, not because I didn't want more children, but because I felt our marriage was cracking at the seams and a new baby would only complicate things. It became another topic for arguments. By Regina's 6th birthday, Lorraine and I were practically living as roommates. We slept in separate rooms, talked only when necessary, and tried not to cross paths at home. I spent more time with my daughter, picking her up from school, helping her with her homework, reading her bedtime stories. Lorraine was increasingly taking on extra shifts at the hospital. It was during that period that I first noticed that Lorraine was turning Regina against me. Nothing overt, subtle remarks, sighs, hints. Daddy's late again. Daddy doesn't have time again. Daddy's too busy with his work. I tried to talk to her about it, but she denied all accusations, calling me paranoid. And then I found out about Lorraine's affair with a doctor at her hospital. I happened to see them together in a coffee shop when I was supposed to be on a business trip but got back early. They were holding hands, looking into each other's eyes. I didn't make a scene, just left without showing my face. That evening, I asked Lorraine directly. She didn't deny it, just asked, "What did you expect? You haven't been my husband for a long time, Ronald. You're like a housemate who sometimes plays with my daughter." Her words hurt me to the core. With my daughter. Not with our daughter, but with my daughter. As if I had no right to paternity. Divorce was inevitable. We both knew that. Lorraine wanted me to move out immediately, but I refused. "I'm not leaving Regina," I said. We spent a terrible 2 weeks under the same roof, barely speaking, trying not to see each other. Regina walked around like she was down in the water, surely feeling the strain. Finally, we met with the lawyers. Lorraine wanted the house, sole custody of Regina, and a hefty alimony payment. I was willing to give up the house, agreed to generous payments, but insisted on joint custody. We argued for months until we came to a compromise. Lorraine would keep the house. I would get the right to see my daughter on weekends and spend part of my vacations with her. I agreed to pay above-average child support so Regina wouldn't need anything. The day I left home was one of the hardest days of my life. Regina stood at the window watching me put my things in the car. I waved at her, but she turned away. Lorraine stood beside her, her hand on her shoulder, a look of triumph on her face. I rented an apartment nearby to be closer to my daughter. The first weekend after the divorce, I showed up to pick up Regina as agreed. Lorraine said she was sick and couldn't go. The same thing happened again a week later. The third time I insisted on seeing her, threatening to take her to court for violating the custody agreement. Lorraine reluctantly allowed me to see my daughter, but only at their home and in her presence. Regina was cold to me. She gave one-word answers, avoided my gaze, wouldn't sit next to me. I felt Lorraine's influence. What was she saying to her daughter about me in my absence? But I kept coming, each time bringing gifts, telling her about my new apartment, inviting Regina to visit. About 6 months after the divorce, Lorraine announced that she was marrying that very same doctor and they were moving to another city 300 miles away. I was desperate. How would I see my daughter? Lorraine indifferently offered to let me visit once a month if I wanted. I contacted a lawyer, but he said there was little chance of stopping the move. The courts usually side with the mother, especially if she remarried and created a stable family. Before I left, I met with Regina alone. I insisted on it, despite Lorraine's resistance. We sat in the park, eating ice cream. Regina was almost 8. She looked sad, but no longer as aloof as before. "Are you going to come visit me?" she asked. "Of course, little girl, as often as you can, and you can come visit me on vacations." "Mommy says you won't want to, that you have a new family." I was shocked. "I don't have a new family, Regina, and even if you ever do, you'll always remain my daughter, my little princess." She smiled, for the first time in a long time, and snuggled up to me. "I'll miss you, Daddy." That afternoon I cut a rose for her from the park bed, strictly forbidden, but I couldn't resist her admiring gaze. The rose was a pale pink, almost white, with a delicate fragrance. "It's as beautiful as you are," I said, handing the flower to my daughter. Regina took it gently, careful not to prick herself on the thorns. After they left, I made a faithful trip to see them once a month. The first few visits went well. Lorraine let me spend the whole day with Regina, sometimes without her being there. But gradually the visits got shorter and shorter, and Lorraine found more and more reasons why Regina couldn't spend much time with me. Music lessons, friends' birthdays, family events with her new husband. I noticed that Regina was becoming aloof again. She talked to me less, smiled less often, refused gifts. One day I overheard Lorraine telling her before I arrived, "Remember what I told you. He left us when you were little. Don't get too attached to him. He might disappear again." I was beyond furious. For the first time ever, I yelled at Lorraine, accused her of lying and manipulating the baby. She coldly replied, "Isn't that the truth? You're gone. You live apart. You see your daughter once a month if you come at all. What kind of father are you?" After that fight, my visits became a real ordeal. Lorraine no longer left us alone together, constantly interfering in conversations, commenting on my every word. Regina became increasingly distant, sometimes refusing to leave her room when I visited. When she turned 10, Lorraine announced that they were moving again, this time to another state, 1,000 miles away. Her husband had accepted a position at a prestigious hospital, and they couldn't pass up the opportunity. I went to a lawyer again, but the result was the same. Nothing could be done. Before I left, I came to say goodbye. Regina was standing at the window when I pulled up in front of the house. I waved to her, but she turned away, just like the day I'd left our old house after the divorce. When I walked in, she had already locked herself in her room and refused to come out. Lorraine said with fake sympathy, "She's upset about the move. You better leave her alone." I left with a heavy heart, leaving a letter and a gift for Regina, a gold chain with a rose-shaped pendant. I don't know if she received it. After they moved, I continued to send letters, cards, and gifts. At first I tried to arrange visits, but Lorraine always found reasons to refuse. Regina is busy with her studies. Regina has important classes. Regina doesn't want to see you. When I insisted on my rights as a father, she bluntly said, "You can sue if you want, but Regina's old enough to have her opinion taken into account, and she says she doesn't want to see you. Do you really want to force her?" I couldn't force my daughter. If she really didn't want to see me, and why not, after everything Lorraine must have told her about me? I couldn't force her. Instead, I kept writing, hoping that one day Regina would want to know the truth. When she turned 18, I sent a special letter, detailing the story of Lorraine and I's divorce, explaining why I'd left, how I'd tried to keep in touch. I didn't accuse Lorraine directly, just laid out the facts as they were. I included my phone number, my address, an invitation to come back anytime. There was no response. I continued to monitor my daughter's life from afar, found out she went to college, then law school. I sent checks for tuition, anonymously through a lawyer, knowing that Lorraine would probably return them if she knew who they were from. When Regina graduated, I sent her a large check, directly with a birthday card. It came back torn into little pieces. It was the moment I almost gave up. Almost, but not quite. I continued to send Christmas and birthday cards even though I no longer expected a response. And now, after all these years, a wedding invitation. Perhaps a last chance to reconnect with my daughter. I closed the album, feeling a mixture of pain and hope. The memories hadn't changed over the years, but maybe Regina had changed. Maybe she was finally ready to hear my side of the story. I greeted my daughter's wedding day with the first rays of the sun. I woke up an hour before my alarm clock and lay staring at the ceiling for a long time, imagining the upcoming meeting. During the night, I dreamed of Regina, not a grown woman getting married, but a little girl with pigtails running toward me with open arms. I woke up with my eyes wet with tears. I performed my morning rituals with the utmost care, as if I were preparing for the most important job interview of my life. I shaved for a long time, trimming every gray hair on my chin, and carefully styled my hair. The suit, bought especially for this occasion, was waiting on the rack, dark blue, conservative but elegant. I put it on, adjusted my tie, and pinned a boutonniere from a rose cut from my garden to my lapel. I'd wrapped the gifts the day before, a watch for Edward and a brooch for Regina, each in a separate box wrapped in silver paper with white ribbons. Next to it was an envelope with a check, my wedding present, a sum I'd been saving for years for this day, even though I wasn't sure it would come. Before leaving, I went over the speech once more, written just in case. Not that I expected to give it. I probably wouldn't be given the opportunity. but I wanted to be ready in case fate suddenly smiled upon me. I left the house at noon sharp. It was 4 hours before the ceremony, but the drive to the Golden Valley Country Club was about an hour, and I wanted to arrive early so I could get my thoughts together and maybe meet Regina before the formal part began. The day was sunny and warm, perfect weather for a wedding. I turned on the radio on the way out, but I didn't listen. My thoughts were preoccupied with the upcoming meeting. How would Regina react to my appearance? What would Lorraine say? Would the groom accept me as the father of the bride, or would he be wary? I arrived at Golden Valley at the beginning of the second. The country club was impressive, a manicured grounds with century-old oaks, a graceful Georgian-style main building, immaculate lawns. A guard was on duty at the gate, checking invitations. He scrutinized mine, checked the list, and indicated where to park. When I got out of the car, I noticed that the guests had already started to gather, mostly young people, probably friends of the bride and groom. They were standing in groups on the lawn, talking, laughing. No one was paying attention to me, and I was glad of that. I needed time to settle in. I headed toward the main building where, according to the signs, the reception was to be held after the ceremony. The ceremony was planned in the garden, in a special gazebo decorated with flowers. As I passed by, I saw rows of white chairs, an archway of roses, and musicians tuning instruments. Everything was elegant and tasteful. In the lobby of the main building, the organizers were bustling about, giving final instructions to the staff. I approached a young woman with a clipboard, introduced myself, and asked where I could find the bride. "Miss Martin is getting ready in the West Wing, sir," she replied. "But I'm not sure if this is a convenient time to visit. Perhaps you would like to wait in the parlor. The ceremony starts in 2 hours." I thanked her and decided to try to see Regina before it started after all. Following the directions, I walked down the hallway to the West Wing. The door to the bride's room was ajar, and I heard women's voices, laughter, exclamations, the rustle of fabric. My heart hammered more frequently. I took a deep breath and knocked. The voices subsided. After a moment, the door opened wider and I saw a young woman, clearly a bridesmaid, judging by the lavender-colored dress. "Yes?" she asked with polite bewilderment. "I'd like to see Regina. I'm her father." The girl's eyes widened. She turned around, clearly unsure of what to do. From inside the room came a voice I recognized immediately, even though I hadn't heard it in 32 years. "Who's there, Melissa?" "Some man. He says that." Without waiting for the end of the sentence, Lorraine appeared in the doorway. She hadn't changed much, the same dark hair, now with gray expertly concealed, the same high cheekbones, though her skin was less firm. Her eyes, cold and wary, looked at me with poorly concealed irritation. "Ronald," she said without a shadow of a smile. "You're early." "Hello, Lorraine. I'd like to see Regina." "She's busy, trying on dresses, makeup, hair, you name it. A woman needs time to prepare for the most important day of her life." I noticed how she emphasized the word woman, as if reminding me that my little girl had long since grown up without my input. "I won't be long. Just wanted to congratulate her in person and give her a gift." Lorraine glanced around at the boxes in my hands and pressed her lips together. "Gifts are accepted during the reception. You'd better wait in the hall or in the garden. Regina will come out when she's ready." She started to close the door, but then another voice came from the back of the room. "Who is it, Mother?" Her heart skipped a beat. It was Regina, my daughter, my child, the one I hadn't seen in so long. Lorraine hesitated for a moment, then sighed. "Your father has arrived." There was a pause. Then Regina said, "Let him come in." Lorraine reluctantly backed away, allowing me to enter the room. I took a step and finally saw her Regina, already in her wedding dress, sitting in front of the mirror while the stylist styled her hair. Our gazes met in the reflection, and I felt my breath catch. She was beautiful, the same dark beauty that Lorraine had, but with my eyes. There was no warmth or hostility in her gaze, just curiosity and maybe a slight tension. "Hello, Regina," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You look beautiful." "Thank you, Mr. Hollister," she replied formally. "Thank you for coming. Mr. Hollister. Not Dad, not Father. Just Mr. Hollister." I felt a prick of pain but tried not to show it. "I couldn't miss my daughter's wedding," I said, taking another step forward. "I brought you a gift, and your fiancé, too." I held out the boxes. Regina nodded to the stylist and he stepped back, giving her a chance to stand up. She walked toward me, slim, elegant, with a proud posture. Took the gifts from my hands without touching my fingers. "Thank you. I'll give Edward his gift." I was hoping to meet him in person. Of course, during the reception. The conversation wasn't going well. I could feel the wary glances of the bridesmaids and the openly hostile one of Lorraine. Regina didn't seem to know what else to say, and I'd exhausted my prepared phrases as well. "Well, I won't interfere with your preparations," I said finally. "I'll see you at the ceremony." Regina nodded with obvious relief. I turned toward the door, but made up my mind at the last moment. "Regina, I'm really glad you invited me. It means a lot to me." She frowned slightly. "Yes, of course. Mom said it was the right thing to do." So, Lorraine had insisted on inviting me after all. I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment, and walked out. I spent the next hour and a half wandering the club's grounds. The guests kept arriving, elegant men in suits, women in smart dresses. I felt lonely and out of place, as if I had accidentally walked into someone else's party. At 4:30, the guests began to be invited to take their places in the garden for the ceremony. I found my place in the last row, far from the center aisle where the bride was to walk. Apparently, I was not considered a close relative. An older man who introduced himself as Edward's uncle sat next to me. We exchanged a few polite phrases. When I told him I was the bride's father, he raised his eyebrows in surprise but said nothing. At exactly 4 o'clock, the music started. The groom walked down the aisle, a tall man with a pleasant face, a little older than Regina, I guessed. The bridesmaids followed, walking down the center aisle one by one, and then came the moment everyone had been waiting for: the appearance of the bride. Regina walked arm in arm with a middle-aged man I didn't know, presumably her stepfather. She was dazzling in her white dress with a long train. I noticed on her shoulder the brooch I had given her, a small flower with a ruby in the center. This detail touched me to the core. The ceremony was beautiful and touching. I watched my daughter say her vows, as she exchanged rings with the man she loved, as she glowed with happiness when the priest pronounced them husband and wife. I cried unashamed tears, cried with pride, joy for her, and bitterness that I was only a distant observer of this important moment in her life. After the ceremony, the guests moved to the main reception hall. I took a seat at the far table where the organizers had assigned me. Sitting with me were distant relatives of the groom and a couple of elderly friends of Lorraine's family. No one knew who I was, and I was in no hurry to introduce myself. The traditional wedding rituals began: the newlyweds' first dance, toasts from the best man and maid of honor, and the cutting of the cake. I watched it all with a bittersweet feeling. Regina looked happy, and that was the main thing. After the basic rituals, the guests began to dance. I noticed Lorraine cast wary glances in my direction a few times, as if afraid I might make a scene. I decided to walk over to the newlyweds to congratulate them personally. They stood surrounded by guests, accepting congratulations. I waited patiently for my turn. Finally, the previous couple stepped aside and I stepped forward. "Congratulations," I said, addressing both of them. "I wish you many years of happiness." Edward smiled and held out his hand. "Thank you. Are you a family friend?" Before I could answer, Regina said, clearly embarrassed, "This is my father." "Oh." Edward looked surprised but quickly managed himself. "It's a pleasure to meet you, sir. Regina hasn't told me much about you." "I'm sure she has," I replied with a slight smile. "We haven't been close in recent years, but I hope that will change now." Regina tensed slightly. Edward, noticing this, tactfully changed the subject. "Thank you for the gift, sir. The watch is absolutely gorgeous. I'm glad you like it. Regina, I noticed you're wearing a brooch." She touched the brooch on her shoulder. "Yes, it went well with the dress. Thank you." There was an awkward pause. I was about to ask if I could ask Regina to dance the traditional father-daughter dance, but I didn't have time. Lorraine approached us, smiling radiantly. "Darlings, the photographer is waiting for you for the family shots," she said, completely ignoring my presence. "The groom's parents are already ready." "We'll be right with you, Mom," Regina replied. Then turning to me, "Excuse me, Mr. Hollister, we have to go." Again, Mr. Hollister, and again that official tone. I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. Of course I dare not delay. They left, and I returned to my table. My neighbor, Edward's uncle, looked at me curiously. "So you're the father of the bride? I'm surprised you weren't invited for the family photos." I shrugged, not wanting to go into an explanation, but his remark hit a sore spot. Really? Why wasn't I invited? Wasn't I part of the family, however distant? The evening went on. I danced with several ladies, widows and divorced women around my age who had been brought to the wedding by friends or relatives. They were nice and talkative, but I responded absent-mindedly, all the while watching Regina. Around 8 p.m., the announcer declared the microphone free for congratulations and toasts from the guests. One by one, friends of the newlyweds, co-workers, and relatives came out. They told funny stories, wished happiness, sometimes joked, the usual wedding speeches. I hesitated. Should I take the floor too? I had a prepared speech, but now I doubted whether it would be appropriate. Finally, I made up my mind. When another guest finished his congratulations, I stood up and headed for the microphone. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Lorraine tense up as she leaned over to Regina and said something quickly to her. I took the microphone and turned to the audience. "Good evening. My name is Ronald Hollister, and I'm—" "Excuse me." Regina stood up suddenly, interrupting me. Her voice sounded loud and clear in the hushed hall. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. This man has nothing to do with our family. He's an outsider here, and I don't understand why he chose to come forward." There was dead silence in the hall. All eyes were on me and Regina. I stood frozen with the microphone in my hand, unable to believe my ears. My own daughter had just publicly disowned me. Lorraine looked triumphant. Edward looked embarrassed. The guests looked at each other with awkward smiles, not sure what was going on. I could have just apologized and walked away. I could have silently put down the microphone and disappeared from Regina's life forever, as she obviously wanted me to. But something inside me, pride, a sense of justice, or just the pain I'd accumulated over the years, wouldn't let me do it. "You're right, Regina," I said calmly. "I am indeed a stranger in your life, but not by choice." I paused, looking directly at her. "You must know the truth about the bride, the truth that has been kept from her for far too long." The hall froze in tense anticipation. I saw Lorraine jump up from her seat and move toward me, but stopped when I continued speaking. My voice sounded unexpectedly firm, though everything inside was trembling. 32 years ago, I divorced Regina's mother. I've only seen my daughter a few times since then, the last one when she was 10 years old. Not because I didn't want to be a part of her life. It was because I wasn't allowed to. I noticed Regina frown, shifting her gaze from me to her mother. Edward put his hand on her shoulder in a gesture of support. The guests fell silent, some looking embarrassed, others intrigued by the unfolding drama. "I'm not going to ruin your wedding with family squabbles," I continued, looking directly at Regina. And I don't want you to choose between me and your mother, but I do want you to know the truth, for once in your life." Lorraine now stood at the edge of the stage, her face contorted with anger. "Ronald, stop this at once!" she hissed. But I shook my head. For too long I'd been silent. For too long I'd let her control the narrative. "After our divorce, I was granted the right to see you on weekends and holidays. For the first few months, your mother found reasons to cancel those meetings. Then you moved to another city. I used to visit you once a month, but gradually, your mother reduced the time we saw each other until they stopped altogether." I took a deep breath, trying to speak calmly and matter-of-factly, without accusations. "When you were 10, you moved to another state. I tried to keep in touch through letters, gifts, phone calls, but your mother decided you were better off without me." Regina shifted her gaze to Lorraine, who now stood stone-faced with her arms crossed over her chest. "I never stopped thinking about you, never stopped loving you. Every year on your birthday and at Christmas, I sent cards and gifts. I followed your progress through mutual acquaintances. I was proud when you went to law school, when you became a successful attorney." I pulled a worn envelope from my inside jacket pocket. "In this envelope are copies of the child support checks I paid before you came of age. Also, here are copies of letters I wrote to you that were returned unopened. Here are receipts for gifts I sent and newspaper clippings of your accomplishments, which I've cherished." I placed the envelope on the nearest table. Regina didn't move from her seat, but I noticed the look on her face change. Disbelief replaced with confusion. "I'm not saying I was the perfect father or the perfect husband. Our marriage to your mother didn't fall apart through her fault alone. We both made mistakes, but I never gave up on you. I never stopped trying to be a part of your life." Now I addressed Lorraine directly. "I don't blame you, Lorraine. You did what you thought was right for Regina. You were a good mother, but you deprived your daughter of a father and you deprived me of a daughter." Lorraine pressed her lips together but said nothing. Her eyes were a mixture of anger and, I thought, slight shame. I turned to Regina again. "Do you know why your mother and I divorced?" Regina shook her head slightly. Her gaze was fixed on me as if she was seeing me for the first time. "Your mother told you that I left, that I abandoned you. But the truth is that she met another man, your future stepfather. I found out about their relationship by accident. When I asked her about it, she didn't deny it. She said she didn't love me anymore, that she wanted to start a new life. I could have fought for our marriage, but I didn't want to hold on to a woman who no longer loved me. So I agreed to the divorce." Lorraine went pale. It was a truth she had never told her daughter. There was a new expression in Regina's eyes, a mixture of shock and disbelief. "I'm not saying this to denigrate your mother or to make you choose between us. I'm saying this because you deserve to know the truth. You're a grown woman. You can decide for yourself what to think and what to believe." There was absolute silence in the hall. No one moved, no one whispered. Even the waiters froze against the walls with trays in their hands. "I didn't start a new family after my divorce, even though your mother may have told you otherwise. I lived alone all those years. I've always had a room in my house for you, in case you ever wanted to come over. The same roses you loved as a child grow in my garden." I saw Regina's hand involuntarily reach for the brooch on my shoulder, the ruby rose I had given her. "I'm not asking you to forgive me for not being there for you when you were growing up. I'm not asking you to accept me into your life now if you don't want me to. I just wanted you to know that your father never stopped loving you and always wanted to be a part of your life." I paused, seeing Regina's eyes fill with tears. I wanted to go over to her, to hug her like I had when she was little, but I knew I didn't have the right to do that. Not now. "Now you have a husband, a new family, a new life. I wish you happiness, Regina. I truly do. And if you ever want to know more about your father, about your story, I'll be waiting." I put the microphone on the stand and walked down the stage. No one stopped me. No one spoke. I headed for the exit, feeling the stares of everyone present. Already at the door, I heard quick footsteps behind me and Regina's voice. "Wait!" I turned around. She was standing a few feet away from me, her wedding dress shimmering in the chandelier lights, tears glistening on her cheeks. "Is it true?" she asked quietly. "Everything you said is true?" "Every word of it," I answered. "I can prove it if you wish. I have kept all the letters that have been returned unopened, all the receipts for gifts, all the court documents of attempts to see you." She looked at me as if trying to see something in my face, in my eyes. "Mom always said you left us, that you didn't want anything to do with me. I know, and I'm sorry you grew up with that thought." I didn't bother to add, "That's exactly what she wanted." I didn't want to turn my daughter against her mother, even now. Regina hesitated, clearly struggling with herself, then took a step toward me. "Why did you choose to say all this today? At my wedding?" I sighed. "I didn't plan it. I came simply as a guest, hoping to be a small part of your happy day. But when you publicly disowned me, I realized this was my last chance to tell you the truth. I've been silent for too long." Edward approached us, looking anxiously at his wife. "Is everything all right, dear?" Regina nodded, not taking her eyes off me. "I think we need to talk. But not now, not today. It's my wedding day, and I want it to be a happy one." "Of course," I agreed. "I didn't mean to mar your celebration. I apologize if I did." "Don't apologize," she said abruptly. "If what you said is true, then I'm the one who should apologize for treating you like that today." I shook my head. "You didn't know. You believed what you've been told your whole life. It's not your fault." Lorraine was heading toward us from the hall, her face a mixture of anger and anxiety. Regina spotted her and quickly said to me, "I'll call you. After the honeymoon, we'll talk." "I'll be waiting," I replied, feeling the warmth of hope spill into my chest. Regina turned to her approaching mother. "Mom, not now. We'll talk later. Right now, I want to get back to my guests." Lorraine stopped, clearly surprised by her daughter's tone. She glared at me but said nothing. Edward offered his wife his hand, and they walked back into the hall together. I heard the announcer announce, "And now, ladies and gentlemen, the traditional dance of the bride and father." I expected Regina to dance with her stepfather as planned, but she turned and looked at me across the room. Our gazes met, and in her eyes I saw a question. I didn't move from my seat, not knowing how to respond. Regina said something to her stepfather, who was standing next to her, ready to dance. He looked surprised, but nodded. Then she headed toward me. "Are you dancing?" she asked, walking over. "With you?" "Always," I replied, calling her you for the first time all day. Regina smiled slightly, the first smile addressed to me in 32 years. "I'm not saying I completely believe you, or that I forgive everything, but I want to know the truth, the whole truth." "That's all I ask," I said, offering her my hand. We stepped out into the center of the hall. A slow tune began to play, the same tune I'd dreamed of dancing to with my daughter at her wedding all these years. The guests parted to form a circle, many whispering, some smiling. I gently placed my hand on my daughter's waist, took her palm in mine. We began to move to the beat of the music, awkwardly at first, then more and more fluidly. I tried not to step on her dress. She tried not to lose the rhythm. "Do you still have any pictures of me as a child?" she asked suddenly. "Every single one," I replied. "And school pictures and newspaper clippings of your academic success, and graduation pictures. I've followed your life from afar as best I could." She thought for a moment. "Why didn't you try to contact me when I became an adult, when I wasn't dependent on my mom anymore?" "I tried. When you turned 18, I sent a special letter with my phone number, my address, an invitation to come over anytime. Then I wrote a few more times. When you graduated from law school, I sent a large check with congratulations." Her eyes widened. "That check, it came back torn to pieces." Yes. After that, I decided that you really didn't want anything to do with me, that maybe your mother was right in shielding you from me. Regina shook her head. I didn't tear up that check. I didn't even know about it. Mom said it only came with a blank greeting from some distant relative. I felt anger rising inside, but suppressed it. This wasn't the time for accusations. It doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that we're dancing now, on your wedding day, and that maybe we'll have a chance to get to know each other again. Regina nodded, but I could see she needed time to process what she'd heard. She'd grown up with one version of the story, and now she was learning a completely different one. She had to decide what to believe, how to feel about her mother, about me, about her own past. The music stopped. We stopped, still holding hands. The guests applauded, politely, but with some restraint, feeling they were witnessing something deeply personal. Thank you for the dance, Regina said, stepping back. And for the truth, whatever it may be. Thank you for listening, I replied. It's more than I dared hope for. She nodded and turned back to her husband, who was watching us with benevolent interest. I noticed Lorraine taking her aside, saying something fervently. Regina was listening, but her gaze turned to me from time to time. I realized I'd done all I could, spoken the truth I'd hidden for too long. I'd opened my daughter's eyes to our family history, at least my version of it. Now it was up to her to decide if she wanted to get to know me better, if she wanted to let me be a part of her life. I walked over to my table to retrieve my jacket. The evening was drawing to a close, and many of the guests were starting to leave. I didn't want to draw any more attention or create any more awkward situations for Regina. Better to leave now, while the dance and our conversation left a positive impression. While putting on my jacket, I felt a touch on my shoulder. Turning around, I saw Edward. "Mr. Hollister," he said seriously, "I don't know what happened between you and Regina's family in the past, but I can see that it's important for her to get to the bottom of it. I want you to know I won't prevent you from communicating with her. If Regina wants to get to know you better, I will support her." I was touched by his words. "Thank you, Edward. That means a lot to me. You seem like a good man. I'm glad my daughter has found such a husband." He smiled. "She's a wonderful woman, smart, strong, kind. You can be proud of her." "I am proud," I replied, "every day of her life." We shook hands, firmly, man to man. I felt like I might have gained an ally in Edward. "Take care of her," I said one last time. "I promise," he replied seriously. I walked out of the gym without looking back. The parking lot was quiet and cool, the stars shining brightly in the dark sky. I took a deep breath of the night air, feeling the weight of years of silence fall from my shoulders. No matter what happened next, I had finally told the truth. And maybe this was the beginning of something new. As I got into my car, I looked once more at the lighted clubhouse where the wedding reception continued. Somewhere out there was my daughter, dancing, laughing, accepting congratulations, probably thinking about me and the words I'd said. I started the engine and drove slowly out of the parking lot. Ahead was the road home and the uncertainty of the future. But for the first time in years, that uncertainty didn't scare me. There was hope in it. I got home around midnight, exhausted emotionally but with a sense of accomplishment. The house greeted me with the usual silence and darkness. I turned on the light in the hallway, hung my jacket on the coat rack, and made my way to the kitchen. I poured myself a whiskey, sat down at the table, and for the first time in that long day allowed myself to fully realize what had happened. I had told the truth. For the first time in 32 years, I'd spoken openly what had been building up inside me for decades. I saw Regina's face, saw her confusion, saw the world she'd spent a lifetime building crumble. I don't know if I did the right thing by choosing her wedding day. Maybe I should have waited, found another moment more suitable for such revelations. But I'd waited so long, put it off so often that I was afraid there might not be another chance. The phone rang the next morning while I was eating breakfast on the veranda. The number was unfamiliar and I answered with some wariness. "Ronald Hollister," I said. "Mr. Hollister, this is Edward Prescott." Regina's fiancé's voice sounded calm and confident. "I hope I'm not calling too early." No, it's fine," I replied, surprised by the call. "What can I do for you?" "Regina and I are leaving on a wedding trip in a few hours, but she'd like to meet you before she leaves. If you're free, of course." I felt my heart beat more frequently. "Yes, of course. When and where?" "At Riverview Park, in an hour. There's a cafe by the pond." "I'll be there," I said, already getting up from the table. "Good. Mr. Hollister, Regina's really upset. We've been talking all night about what happened. Please be patient with her." I promised I would and hung up, then hurriedly got ready, choosing more casual clothes than yesterday's formal suit, pants, shirt, light sweater. He wanted to look natural, not create unnecessary tension. Riverview Park was about 20 minutes from my house. I arrived early and took a table on the outdoor patio of a cafe overlooking the pond. The morning was clear and crisp, with ducks floating on the water and the scents of flowers and freshly baked buns from the cafe filling the air. At exactly the right time, I saw Regina entering the park. She was alone, no Edward, no Lorraine. She was wearing a simple summer dress and sunglasses, her hair in a casual bun. She looked younger than she had in her wedding gown yesterday, and more tired at the same time. When she caught sight of me, she paused for a moment, as if hesitating, then walked determinedly toward my table. "Good morning," she said, sitting down across from me. "Good morning, Regina," I replied. "Thanks for coming over, especially today, when you must have a lot to do before you leave." She nodded slightly, taking off her glasses. Her eyes were reddened. Obviously, she hadn't slept much. "I thought we should talk, after last night." The waitress came over to take the order. Regina only asked for coffee. I asked for the same. When the waitress stepped away, an awkward silence hung between us. "I talked to my mom last night after you left," Regina finally said. "She's very upset." "I can imagine," I replied neutrally. "She says you misrepresented the facts, that it wasn't the way you told it." I nodded. "I expected that. We each remember the past in our own way, through the prism of our own feelings and beliefs. She denies that she prevented our meetings, says that you yourself gradually lost interest, that your visits became less and less frequent, that you chose your career over your family." I sighed. "And what do you remember, Regina? You were small, but not so small that you don't have memories of your own." She hesitated. "I remember you coming over, first often, then less often. I remember waiting for you and you never came." "Did your mother tell you why I didn't come?" "That you had important things to do, that you were busy, and then that you just didn't want to see me." I shook my head. "I came every time as arranged, but your mother often canceled appointments at the last minute." "Regina is sick. Regina has an important test. Regina doesn't want to see you. I've never been too busy for you. Never." The waitress brought our coffee. Regina cupped her palms around the cup as if trying to keep warm, even though the morning was warm. "I don't know what to believe," she admitted quietly. "All my life I thought you abandoned us, that you didn't want to be my father, and now you're saying something completely different. I understand your confusion, and I'm not asking you to believe me right away, just to give you a chance to know the truth." Regina took a sip of coffee, then set the cup down and looked me straight in the eye. "Why did you keep quiet for so long? Why didn't you try to meet me when I became an adult? Find me through social media, through mutual acquaintances?" "I tried," I replied. "When you turned 18, I sent a special letter, wrote it again afterward, many times, but there was no reply. I decided that you really didn't want to see me, that maybe your mother was right in shielding you from me." "I never received any of your letters," Regina said. "Not a single one. That's what I thought. but there's no way to prove it." She shook her head. "It sounds so unbelievable. That Mom could have been hiding your letters, preventing us from seeing each other. Why would she do that?" I chose my words carefully. "Your mother was very hurt after our divorce. She thought I had betrayed her, when in fact it was her. But it doesn't matter. I think she truly believed she was doing the right thing by keeping you away from me, that it would be better for you to forget your real father and accept your stepfather as your new daddy." "But why did she invite you to the wedding, if she didn't want us to socialize?" I shrugged. "Maybe guilt. Maybe the pressure of public opinion. What's it like not to invite your own father to your daughter's wedding? Or she was convinced you were so distant that my presence wouldn't make a difference." Regina twirled the cup in her hands thoughtfully. "I need time to make sense of all this. For 32 years I've believed one version of events. I can't accept another overnight." "I understand. I'm not rushing you. But I want to know more. When we return from our wedding trip, I'd like to meet again, have a thorough conversation, maybe see those letters and pictures you talked about." I felt my heart overflow with hope. "Of course. I'll be waiting. When are you coming back?" "In 2 weeks. We're flying to Bali." "That sounds wonderful. I hope you have a good vacation." She smiled slightly, for the first time since we'd met. "Thank you." We finished our coffee in a more comfortable silence. Then Regina looked at her watch. "I have to go. The plane is in 4 hours and I haven't finished packing." We stood up. I didn't know how to say goodbye. A handshake? A hug? But Regina decided for me. She stepped forward and awkwardly but sincerely hugged me. Only for a moment, but it was enough to make me feel the ice had been broken. "See you in 2 weeks," she said, pulling back. "I'll be waiting," I replied. "Have a safe trip." She nodded and walked toward the park exit. I stared after her until she disappeared around the corner of the alley, and only then did I realize I had tears in my eyes. The next 2 weeks dragged on endlessly. I did the usual things, working in the garden, meeting friends, reading books, but my thoughts kept returning to Regina, to our conversation, to the possibility of reconnecting after so many years apart. The 3rd day after the wedding, I got a call from Lorraine. I wasn't expecting this call and was surprised to see her name on the phone screen. "Ronald." Her voice sounded cold and official. "I think we need to talk." "I'm listening," I replied neutrally. "What you did at the wedding is unforgivable. You ruined the most important day of Regina's life with your ridiculous accusations." "I didn't accuse you, Lorraine. I just told the truth. My version of the truth." "Your version!" Rage rang in her voice. "You twisted all the facts, portrayed yourself as the victim and me as the villain. That's not fair, Ronald. Was it fair to tell your daughter that I abandoned you, that I didn't want to see her, to conceal my letters, to prevent our seeing each other?" "I was protecting my daughter," Lorraine shouted, "from a man who chose his career over his family, who spent hours at work instead of being with us." "I worked to provide for you," I replied calmly. "And you started dating James long before our divorce. It was that, not my work, that ruined our marriage." She was silent for a moment, then said more quietly, "That's all in the past, Ronald. What's important is that now you're meddling in Regina's life, sowing doubt, destroying her relationship with her mother. I don't want to destroy your relationship. I just want a chance to build my own with my daughter." "After 32 years of not being in her life?" "Through no fault of my own," I said firmly. Lorraine sighed. "Regina said she wants to meet you after she returns from her trip. I can't forbid her. She's a grown woman. But please, don't turn her against me. Don't ruin what we have." I was surprised at this sudden change of tone, this almost pleading in the voice of a woman who had always been so strong and unyielding. "I won't turn her against you, Lorraine, but neither will I lie if she asks about the past." "She'll never forgive me if she finds out everything," Lorraine said quietly. "She's your daughter. She loves you. There may be a difficult period, but I'm sure she'll find the strength to forgive." After that conversation, I pondered Lorraine's motives for a long time. Was she really sure she was protecting her daughter by hiding her father from her? Or was it revenge against me for the divorce? Or did she just not want to share Regina's love with anyone else? Wanted to be the only parent in her life? I couldn't answer these questions and decided that, in the end, it didn't matter anymore. All that mattered was the future, the eventual restoration of a relationship with my daughter. 2 weeks later, when Regina was due back from her wedding trip, I began waiting for her call. I prepared all the materials I'd talked about: letters, photos, documents. I wanted her to have no doubts about my sincerity. But the days passed, and there was no call. A week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I began to worry. Maybe she changed her mind. Maybe Lorraine had convinced her not to see me. Or maybe, back in her normal life, she just decided the past was better left in the past. I didn't want to pressure her, so I didn't call her myself. But with each passing day, hope melted away, and I began to prepare myself for the thought that our brief encounter in the park might have been the first and last. And then, almost a month after the wedding, the doorbell rang. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was working in the garden, and I wasn't expecting guests. Taking off my gardening gloves and shaking my jeans off the ground, I went to open it. On the doorstep stood Regina, and not alone. Edward was next to her. "Hello," she said. "Sorry for the unannounced visit. We were driving by and thought we'd stop by." I stood, unable to hide my surprise and joy. "Regina, Edward, sure, come on in." They entered the house. I led them into the living room, apologized for my appearance, and offered tea or coffee. They chose tea, and I left for the kitchen, giving myself time to gather my thoughts. When I returned with the tray, Regina was looking at the pictures on the walls, the same ones I'd told her about. Her baby pictures, school pictures, newspaper clippings of her successes. "You've really followed my life all these years," she said quietly. "As best I could," I replied, setting the tray on the table. "From afar, through mutual acquaintances, through local newspapers. When the internet came along, it got easier." We sat down. I poured the tea, trying to keep my hands from shaking with excitement. "How was your wedding trip?" I asked to start the conversation. "Wonderful," Edward replied. "Bali is an amazing place." "Yeah, it was good," Regina seconded, but I could see that she was far away from the beaches of Bali with her thoughts. "I'm sorry I didn't call right after I got back. I needed the time." "I understand. I've been thinking a lot about what you told me. Talked to my mom. She admitted that it wasn't all like she'd told me before." I was surprised. Lorraine had admitted she was wrong. That wasn't like her. "She doesn't agree with your version of everything," Regina continued, "but has admitted that she may have shielded me from you too much, that perhaps her resentment toward you influenced her decisions." I nodded, not wanting to comment. This was progress, and I didn't want to ruin it by criticizing Lorraine. "I found some of your letters," Regina said abruptly, "in an old box in the attic of Mom's house. They were unopened. And then there are the receipts for the money transfers you sent for my tuition." I felt a lump come up to my throat. "Did you read the letters?" "Yes, all of them. I want to apologize for the way I treated you at the wedding, for saying you were an outsider. I didn't know, didn't realize." "You have nothing to apologize for," I said softly. "You've believed what you've been told your whole life. It's natural." Regina set her cup down and looked me in the eye. "I'd like to get to know you better, if that's okay with you." "Mind?" I couldn't hold back a smile. "Regina, this is everything I've dreamed of for the last 32 years. Edward put his hand on his wife's shoulder, and she smiled gratefully at him. I realized that he was supporting her in this decision, and I was grateful. "It won't be easy," Regina warned. "It's been so many years. We're practically strangers to each other, and Mom, she's having a hard time accepting this situation." "I understand, and I don't expect things to get better right away. We can move in small steps, at a pace that's comfortable for you. She nodded. I'd like you to come to our house for dinner next Friday. Get to know our home, our life. I'd love to, I replied, feeling my heart overflow with joy. We talked for another hour or so. Regina asked me about my life, my job, my hobbies. I talked, trying not to overwhelm her with information, realizing that we'd have plenty of time to talk. Edward mostly listened, occasionally inserting a relevant comment. I could see that he was an intelligent and thoughtful man, and I was glad that Regina had found such a life partner. As they got ready to leave, Regina stopped at the door and asked, "May I ask a personal question?" "Sure." "You never remarried? After divorcing your mom?" I shook my head. "No." "Why?" I hesitated, picking my words. "Probably because part of me was always busy thinking about you, about what I've lost, about what I couldn't keep. There have been women in my life, but none that I felt ready to start a new family with." Regina nodded, as if my answer confirmed something she'd already guessed. "Thanks for your honesty. See you Friday." They left, and I stood on the doorstep watching them go. There was hope in my heart, fragile but real. Hope that, after so many years of separation and misunderstanding, my daughter and I could find our way back to each other. That the truth spoken in that dramatic moment at the wedding would not be the end, but the beginning of a new chapter in our relationship. I returned to the garden, to the unfinished work. The rose bush I'd grown for so long in memory of little Regina was full of buds. Soon they would open, filling the air with a delicate fragrance. Perhaps on her next visit, Regina will see them in their full glory. Perhaps she would remember how much she loved these flowers as a child. I knelt down in front of the bush, carefully trimming the dry branches, preparing it for a new bloom, like my life, which might be preparing for a new bloom.